Book of Heaven. Volume 16. 4th to the 20th of January 1924. Page 73 to 80. January 4, 1924. The words of Jesus in the garden. Not my will, but yours be done. In this way he established with his celestial Father the contract of the kingdom of the divine will upon earth. I was thinking about the words of Jesus in the garden, when he said, Father, if it is possible, let this chalice pass from me. Yet, non mea voluntas, sed tua fiat. Not my will, but yours be done. And my sweet Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, My daughter, do you think it was for the chalice of my passion that I said to the Father, Father, if it is possible, let this chalice pass from me? Not at all. It was the chalice of the human will which contained such bitterness and fullness of vice, that my human will united to the divine felt such repugnance, terror and fright, as to cry out, Father, if it possible, let this chalice pass from me. How ugly it is the human will without the divine will, which enclosed itself in each creature, as within a chalice. There is no evil in the generations, of which it is not the origin, the seed, the source. And in seeing myself covered with all these evils produced by the human will, before the sanctity of my will, I felt like dying. And indeed I would have died if the divinity had not sustained me. But do you know why I added, and as many as 3 times, non mea voluntas, sed tua fiat? Not my will, but yours be done. I felt upon myself all the wills of creatures united together, all their evils, and in the name of all I cried out to the Father, May the human will be done on earth no more, but the divine. May the human will be banished, and may yours reign. Therefore, from that moment, and I wanted to do this at the very beginning of my passion, because it was the thing which interested me the most and the most important one, to call upon earth the fiat voluntas tua, on earth as it is in heaven. I myself said in the name of all, non mea voluntas, sed tua fiat. From that time I constituted the era of the fiat voluntas tua, upon earth. And by saying it 3 times, in the first one I impetrated it, in the second I made it descend, and in the third I constituted it ruler and dominator. And in saying, non mea voluntas, sed tua fiat, I intended to empty the creatures of their wills and to fill them with the divine. Before dying, since I had only hours left, I wanted to negotiate with my celestial Father my prime purpose, for which I came upon earth, that the divine will take its first place of honor in the creature. This had been the first act of man, to withdraw from the supreme will, and therefore our first offense. All his other evils are in the secondary order. It is always my will to have primacy in all things. And even though the fruits of redemption could be seen before its effects, it was by virtue of this contract which I made with my divine Father that his fiat would come to reign upon earth, realizing the true purpose of the creation of man and the prime purpose for which I came upon earth, and that man could receive the fruits of redemption. Otherwise, my wisdom would have lacked order. If the origin of evil was his will, it was this will that I had to order and restore, reuniting divine will and human will. And even though the fruits of redemption could be seen first, this says nothing. My will is like a king who, though being first among all, arrives as last, being preceded, for honor and decorum, by his peoples, armies, ministers, princes and the whole royal court. Therefore, the fruits of redemption were needed first, so that the royal court, the peoples, the armies and the ministers could be found worthy of the majesty of my will. But do you know who was the first one to cry out together with me, non mea voluntas, sed tua fiat? It was my little newborn of my will, my little daughter, who felt such repugnance and fright for her will as to cling to me, and trembling, she cried out with me, Father, if it possible, let this chalice pass from me. And crying, she added with me, non mea voluntas, sed tua fiat. Ah, yes, you were together with me in that first contract with my celestial Father, because at least one creature was needed in order to validate this contract. Otherwise, to whom give it? To whom entrust it? And in order to render the custody of the contract safer, I gave you all the fruits of my passion as gift, lining them up around you like a formidable army which, while forming the royal court of my will, wages a fierce war against your will. Therefore, have courage in the state in which you find yourself. Dismiss the thought that I may leave you. It would go against my will, since I keep the contract of my will deposited in you. So, be at peace. It is my will that tests you, and wants not only to purge you, but to destroy even the shadow of your will. So, in all peace, continue your flight in my will and be concerned with nothing. Your Jesus will do in such a way that everything which may happen inside and outside of you, will make my will stand out even more and will expand its boundaries in you, in your human will. I myself will maintain the rhythm in your interior, in order to direct everything in you according to my will. I occupied myself with nothing else but the will of my Father, and since all things are in it, I occupied myself with everything. And if I taught a prayer, it was no other prayer than this, that the divine will be done on earth as it is in heaven. However, it was the prayer which enclosed everything. Therefore, I did not move if not around the supreme will. My words, my pains, my works, my heartbeats, were filled with celestial will. So do I want you to do. You must go around it so much as to let yourself be burned by the eternal breath of the fire of my will, in such a way as to lose any other knowledge, and to know nothing else but my will, only and always. January 14, 1923. The divine will was everything for man, and with it he needed nothing. Before the scourging, Jesus wanted to be stripped, in order to give back to the creature her royal garments. I was contemplating the mystery of the scourging, compassionating my sweet Jesus in the moment when he saw himself so confused in the midst of enemies, stripped of his garment, under a storm of blows. And my adorable Jesus, coming out from my interior in the state in which he found himself when he was scourged, told me, "My daughter, do you want to know the reason for which I was stripped when I was scourged? In every mystery of my passion, first I occupied myself with adjusting the fracture between the human will and the divine, and then with the offenses which this fracture produced. When man in Eden broke the bonds of the union between the supreme will and his will, he stripped himself of the royal garments of my will, and clothed himself with the miserable rags of his will, weak, inconstant, incapable of doing any good. My will was a sweet enchantment for him, which kept him absorbed within a most pure light, which made him know nothing but his God, from whom he came, and which gave him nothing else but immeasurable happiness. And he was so absorbed by all that his God gave him, that he gave no thought to himself. Oh, how happy man was, and how the divinity delighted in giving him so many particles of his being for as many as the creature can contain, in order to render him similar to himself. So, as soon as he broke the union of our will with his, he lost the royal garment, he lost enchantment, light, happiness. He looked at himself without the light of my will, and in looking at himself without the enchantment which kept him absorbed, he knew himself and felt ashamed. He was afraid of God, to the extent that nature itself felt its sad effects. He was cold, felt his nakedness, and felt the strong need to cover himself. And just as our will kept him in the harbor of immense happinesses, so did his will put him in the harbor of miseries. Our will was everything for man, and in it he found everything. It was fair that, having been delivered by us and living in our will as our tender child, he would live of it. And this will was to make up for all that he needed. Therefore, when he wanted to live of his will, he needed everything because the human will does not have the power to make up for all needs, nor does it contain the source of good within itself. So, he was forced to earn with hardship the necessary things of life. See, then, what it means not to be united with my will. Oh, if all knew it, how they would have one single yearning, that my will come to reign upon earth. Therefore, had Adam not withdrawn from the divine will, also his nature would have had no need of clothing. He would not have felt the shame of his nakedness, nor would he have been subject to suffer cold, heat, hunger, weakness. But these natural things were almost nothing. They were, rather, symbols of the great good which his soul had lost. So, my daughter, before being tied to the column to be scourged, I wanted to be stripped in order to suffer and repair the nakedness of man, when he stripped himself of the royal garment of my will. I felt such confusion and pain within me in seeing myself stripped in the midst of enemies who were making fun of me, that I cried over the nakedness of man, and I offered my nakedness to my celestial Father, so that man might be clothed once again with the royal garment of my will. And as ransom, so that it would not be denied to me, I offered my blood, my flesh torn to shreds, and I let myself be stripped not only of my garment, but also of my flesh, to be able to pay the price and satisfy for the crime of nakedness of man. I poured so much blood in this mystery that in no other did I pour so much of it, so much as to be enough to cover him with a second garment, a garment of blood, to cover him again and therefore warm him and wash him, to dispose him to receive the royal garment of my will. On hearing this, surprised, I said, "My beloved Jesus, how can it be possible that, because he withdrew from your will, man felt the need to clothe himself, was ashamed, was afraid? And then, you always did the will of the celestial Father, you were one with him, and your mama never knew her will, yet, you felt the need of clothing, of food, and you suffered cold and heat." And Jesus added, "Yet, my daughter, it is exactly so. If man felt ashamed of his nakedness and was subject to many natural miseries, it was exactly because he lost the sweet enchantment of my will, and even though the evil was done by his soul, not by his body, the body, however, was an indirect accomplice in the bad will of man. His nature remained as though profaned by the bad will of man, therefore both one and the other had to feel the pain of the evil done. As far as myself, indeed I always did the supreme will, but I did not come to find an innocent man, a man before sin. Rather, I came to find a man sinner and with all his miseries. And so I had to join him, taking upon myself all the evils of man, and subjecting myself to all the necessities of life, as if I were one of them. However, in me there was this prodigy. If I wanted, I would need nothing, either clothing, food or other things. But I did not want to use it out of love for man. I wanted to sacrifice myself in everything, even in the most innocent things created by me, in order to prove him my ardent love. Even more, this served to beseech my divine Father, so that, out of regard for me and for my will completely sacrificed to him, he would give back to man the noble royal garment of our will. January 20, 1924. The only refreshment in the privation of Jesus is to wander more in the divine will. The divine will is a sea of light and of fire in which one cannot stop, but needs to go around continuously in order to take everything in every instant. I was in the hard state of the usual privations of my beloved good, and I felt immersed in bitterness, deprived of He who alone makes sun, warmth, smile and happiness arise in my poor soul. Without Him, it is always night time. I remain numb with the cold of His privation. I am unhappy. So I felt oppressed, and my sweet Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, courage, do not abandon yourself prey to oppression. If you knew how much I suffer in seeing you suffer. I suffer so much that, in order not to see you suffer so much, I put you to sleep, but I remain close to you. I do not leave you. And while you sleep, I do for you what we should be doing together, if you were awake, because it is not you who want to sleep, but it is I who want it, and so I make up for you. Do you see how much I love you? If you knew how much I suffer when I see you wake up and fidget, because you have not realized that I was close to you, since I myself had put you to sleep in the torment of my privation. It is true that you suffer, I too suffer. But it is the bond of my will which flows in you also in this, and clasping you more, renders our union even more stable. Therefore, courage, and remember that you are the little boat of my will, and the divine will is not a sea of water, which has its ports and shores, where boats, ships and passengers make their stops, where they rest, have a good time, and many passengers don't even return to cross the sea. The sea of my will is sea of light and of fire, with no port and no shore. Therefore, there are no stops for my little boat. She must cross it continuously, but with such speed as to enclose the whole unending eternity in each one of your heartbeats and acts. in such a way as to connect them to that eternal heartbeat and act, which is heartbeat and act of everyone. And you, crossing over all, will go around eternity at each one of your heartbeats. You will take everything, and will bring us all that comes from the divinity in order to give and to receive, but which gives without receiving. And my little boat has the task to cross the immense sea of my will in order to give us return of all that comes from us. So, if you oppress yourself, you will lose attention in the round, and the sea of my will, not feeling shaken by the fast rounds of my little boat, will burn you even more, and you will fidget even more because of my privation. But if you keep going around, you will be like that sweet little breeze which, bringing refreshment to my fire, will serve you to sweeten the torment you suffer because of my privation.